Hey everybody, and welcome to another APA style video. In this one, we are going to go into the perhaps small market share, like I did with the Apple iWork suite, and discuss LibreOffice and OpenOffice. And this particular series of videos that'll come out on the channel over the next few weeks are going to be geared toward the same kinds of processes that I've outlined in Excel, in Google Sheets, and Apple Numbers. So we are going to focus on how to do your APA-style charts and figures and graphs in LibreOffice and OpenOffice. These are two free open source work productivity suites that come with your word processor, your spreadsheet functions, your presentation functionality, and a few other things in both suites. They're generally speaking very similar suites of programs, and essentially you operate the apps in a single window. So when you open LibreOffice, for example, you open a single app and it asks you, do you want to do a word processing document? Do you want to do a presentation? Do you want to do a spreadsheet? Same thing with OpenOffice. You are going to their calc function. So I've got I think the most updated LibreOffice open here, and I wanted to have my data ready to go. So this is the data that you've seen. If you've watched the other videos, these are the data. These are the data that you've seen in other ones. This is my go-to set for my regular single variable column chart with standard error bars. So we'll go through that all in this video. And at the end of the video, I'll explain that the process is extremely similar in OpenOffice. We're going to use LibreOffice. Just know that if you've downloaded OpenOffice, then you just follow the same procedures. It'll look slightly different, and that's it. Everything else is going to be the same in these two app suites. Again, at least in my experience, you download these, you open the app, and you can do all of the things. So OpenOffice calls it Calc. I believe LibreOffice calls it Calc or something like that. There's something very similar to that as well. So this is the information that you need. You go to the website, you type in LibreOffice, and you have an open source. You can export as an XLS or a CSV file, or you can export the images as image files to work on in other apps. But honestly, we're going to create APA-style figures that work of the gate. You save it as a JPEG, you save it as a PNG, and boom, you're ready to go. So that's what we're going to do in this series of videos. If you have any questions, please, or comments, please leave those in the comments down below. Like I said, LibreOffice is probably a small market share, but for the folks who want to support smaller developmental organizations, nonprofits that work on making apps available for everyone, regardless if you have a productivity license in Microsoft or you prefer Google. As you may note, Google struggles with the standard error situation, error bars. So, it's free, but, there's an issue with privacy and what data that Google has when you store things on Drive and use their apps, all that kind of stuff. Then you've got iWork and Numbers, Apple. If you don't have a Mac, then you're not using Numbers. So where does that leave everyone else? Linux users are probably going to be using LibreOffice or OpenOffice. It's just the nature of, I'm sure they can get the Microsoft Office suite going, Office 365, but maybe they're using this because that's why they chose Linux in the first place, right? GNU, open license kind of thing. Things are free if you have the ability to work with them. And I will say, going through, I barely used these apps because I've kind of always had a Microsoft account and access to Microsoft, even standalone on Windows or standalone on Mac, and then through my current job having a license because we are a Microsoft campus, that kind of thing. I haven't really used these apps all that much, but they are full suited. They can do a lot. And dare I say, these spreadsheet programs, I think, have a lot more functionality than Google Sheets. And that's saying a lot. When your industry standard is Excel, and most people choose the option to go with the free alternative that has a market hold, Google Sheets, you kind of lose out on the functionality. Like, yeah, the set of buttons is quite big, and it's like, well, how do I do any of this stuff? And as you'll see, the options for the graphs are quite extensive, and maybe a little bit more piecemeal and step-by-step than even Excel. So this could be a possibility in this realm. If you want to make decently good-looking and readable APA figures, then I do recommend it. It is another program to have, of course. All right, so let's jump into this episode. That was a big preamble. Let's jump into this big episode on creating a simple two-level single independent variable or factor bar graph, or column graph, as it's going to be called in this. Columns are vertical, bars are horizontal, so that's what we're going to do. Now, I'm already in the spreadsheet. When you open LibreOffice, it'll have a splash screen and ask you what kind of document that you want to do. You'll click the spreadsheet, and it'll take you into this. You'll enter in your data. I had some wonky copy and pasting issues from Excel to LibreOffice where this data lived previously, so I'm not entirely sure why that happened, but in any case, I got it in here and it's all good to go. These are text and these are numbers, right? Text and numbers, right? So we are going to create a graph that is a column to represent these two means. And then we're going to add error bars at the end to round out our data presentation. So the first thing we need to do is we need to select our data with its labels. Okay, so these are the means. The program is going to know that these are numbers and that's what we're going to plot. And then these are labels by default. But we do get the chance to specify it. Now, where do we go next? Well, we have this insert chart button here. That's what we're going to do. We're going to click on that and it's going to bring up this dialog box. Now, as you can see, the chart already populated itself because there are certain defaults that all of these spreadsheets recognize when it runs through the algorithm with your data in here, right? So a couple of things that we can do to get us going, right? So it opens up this chart wizard and there are 4 steps as you can see. Now down here, we have a next button and we have a finish button. Finish will accept this graph as is. Okay, that's all it will do. It will accept this graph as is. But if I want to make changes to any of these types, these steps, data range, data series, chart elements, then we can click next and we'll go through each one. So column, this is what we want here. We don't want a stacked or percent stacked. We also don't want 3D looks. Try as these things might be not useful for a fun business presentation, but not necessarily for what we're going to be doing here, right? And as you can see, bar and column is vertical, bar is horizontal. Then in another video, we'll do line graphs. And in another video, we'll do a scatter plot. And there are a few other chart types. We're going to stick with column today. I'm going to click next to go through each of these wizard steps with you here, but the default is pretty good, I will say. So the next time you make a chart at this level of complexity, then I think clicking finish is absolutely fine. So let's click on next and figure out our data range. Now, of course, it knows the data range itself. It is sheet 1, which is what we're at, column B, and row 6 to column C and row 7. The dollar signs there mean that this is not changing. Yes, the column B, column C, row 6, and then column B, column C, row 7. Data series in rows. That is true. 3.65 followed by 10.3 something. Okay. Or you can choose data series and columns. These are mutually exclusive. And if I click that, it would make this all wonky, right? It would go down the rows. And this checkbox is first row as label. You can take that off if you want to. It's a tick box. It's a checkbox. It is not necessary to produce this graph. If I uncheck this, we'll get rid of it and just put a 1 and a 2. We don't want that. We don't want that because it's adding it's trying to plot yes PhD and no PhD when I did that. And of course that doesn't work. First column as the label would label these yes PhD and 3.65. So we want to leave that unchecked. This is uncommon. That's why this is the default, because this is the common way to set up your data. Next moves us on to data series. It knows that the data series is row 7. Those are the numbers. We can change the border color. We can change the fill color. We can change the name. Okay, it's now just making it row 7, and it can change, and we can change the range of values. Here you can see that it is B7 and C7. B7 to C7. B7, C7. Perfect. And then those categories for naming these two come from B6 and C6. B6 and C6. Okay, so name. You can name this if you want to. This could be the name of the variable, which is pursuing PPH. Apparently, it doesn't like it that it has a space in there. There we go. And it gets rid of capitals. I don't know if I necessarily like that in a legend. So choose it if you want to. It doesn't really matter. Let's move on to chart elements. So this is where the chart elements come in that we have to manually change all the time in Excel by going through menu options. Here, we can do it all at once. Luckily, this whole thing doesn't have a title by default. Amazing. We're going to leave that blank. Also, don't need a subtitle. X-axis would actually be where we would put our pursuing PhD. Pursuing PhD. And after a second, it will put it underneath. Perfect. That's our X-axis label. Awesome. And then here, we would put number of hours worked per week. I should probably put a capital here. Number of hours worked per week. There we go. And there it is. So we put all those in there immediately. Awesome. We can also change whether we want our display grids and where we want our legend. And here I am going to uncheck legend for this particular graph because there's no reason to have it for this. And we're going to uncheck y-axis to get rid of the y-axis grid lines. Awesome. We have just done a number of changes to this graph to make it APA style really easily, like super great. Awesome. We're going to click finish because we're done here. We are not quite done with the graph itself, though. We need to change some fonts, although I do like Liberation Sans. It's a very nice looking font. It's the font developed by the devs at LibreOffice to be their default sans serif font. It's fairly readable. It's good. Of course, this graph is zoomed in, and it's not going to necessarily look exactly like this if we were to put it into a poster presentation, for example, or even a presentation, like a slide presentation, slide deck on a projector, right? So it's not going to look exactly like this, and that's important. But we are not too far from being done here. Up here, when we have the chart selected, now the chart selected is important. It needs to be this solid gray line. I am actually going to reduce the area here. You gotta have the hand to make it a little bit smaller. And then I click off of it so I can oh, I moved it. That's what happened. Let's move it like this. No, there we go. There we go. We want to make it a little bit smaller. It's hard to tell where exactly. There we go. Have everything in the window now. Now, I gotta select this by double clicking on it. Okay. And as you can see, I've got the solid gray line around it. There we go. For some reason that it wasn't giving me, so that the hand on the edge will allow me to move it around, and the arrows on the black dots will allow me to increase the size. Okay. So that's how we can do that. Of course, we want it to fill the screen so you can all see it. So that's why it's pretty big here. So up here is where we have all of our chart selections and things that we want to change. This Dropbox menu gives us the chart area to change, the chart itself to change, the x-axis itself to change, the x-axis title, the y-axis itself, the y-axis title, and then the data series, which is Pursuing Ph.D. That's what I named this. That's what the legend is called. So the legend will always have this name if you specify it. So let's go axis by axis, shall we? Let's start with the x-axis. Well, we've got our title here. We've got our labels. Yes and no. I guess maybe this Pursuing Ph.D., we should have a question mark on the end of it. Oh, just whatever, you know, well, it's fine. But maybe we want to make some changes to the x-axis itself. And yes, I do want to make changes. I like a solid black line here to make it clear that this is the 0 line. This is where the bars themselves start. So we're going to click on x-axis to bring up these options. Okay, where are my format option? Format selection. There we go. So when you choose it, you click on the, come on, bring it. Let's cancel. So I'm going to choose x-axis, right? And it's going to give me these, I guess we'll call them sort of red dots to indicate that that's what I want to change. And then over here, we have the format selection button. This will bring up the dialog box for the x-axis, right? So this is giving me all of the options that I can use to change my x-axis. So we've got the scale. We can reverse the direction and put no over here and yes over here. We don't want to do that. Okay, so positioning. So axis line cross at other axis at value 0. That's by default. You can change that if you want to restrict your y-axis scale. Position the axis on tick marks or between tick marks. That's this tick mark down here. Place labels near axis. So if other options were near axis, other side, it would put yes PhD on here. Right, if I did that, give it a second. Can do it. It doesn't seem to have changed. Outside the start or outside the end. For some reason, the labels are not changing. All right, so we'll just leave it at default. Interval marks. You can have that tick mark there or not. Oh, you must have to hit OK to do this. These changes aren't going to be automatic. So let's change this to near axis, other side. Yeah, that's what it did. Okay, you have to hit OK. I see. And it always brings it into the middle. Let's not do that. So we are going to put it near axis, and you can have that tick mark there or not. I'm going to uncheck it. It's not necessary. And I'm going to hit OK so we can come back and make some changes. Again, you have to either double click on it, double click on the axis, right click and format axis, or click on that button. The 3 ways to do it, of course, 3 ways to do it. So those are the interval marks for our x-axis. Moving on to line. So here's a preview of the lines themselves. So first, you have a choice of what kind of line you want. By default, it's continuous, right? It's a continuous line going from right to left. That's what we want. But its color is this gray, and I don't want that. I want hashtag or pound 0000, right? Fully black line. Of course, again, it's not going to change it until I hit OK, but this is what it's going to look like. We can change the thickness by inches. You can see that it is a quotation mark here or inverted commas, right? I can change this to a thicker line if I want to. The thickness at 0 is its default thickness, which is this thickness here. And you can see if I change this to 1 inch, what that looks like. I'm going to click off of it. It's very thick. We don't want it to be 1 inch. So you're going to be using very tiny. I'm not entirely sure why they chose inches for this, but you can use the buttons to make them a little bit thicker. You can see, wow, they get thick really quickly. I wouldn't recommend changing the default. Okay. Transparency is how light it will be if you have other things going on. Label, we've already given them the text, but this is the label on how to make them appear in the axis itself. You can tile stagger, even stagger odd. You can overlap or break them up. You can change the orientation. 0 degrees is horizontal, or you can vertically stack them, or you can use the object settings from over here, okay? Or left to right, right to left, left to right, right to left, either one. I wouldn't recommend changing any of these. Font effects. So by default, font color is black, which is nice. That's what we're going to leave it as. You can do overlining, strike throughs, or underlining. I don't recommend doing all of these. So by default, they are all without. And you can do any kinds of effects. So you can do embossed, engraved, which will change. And here is your preview text using the Liberation Sans font. So whatever font this is will tell you that. And you can either give it outline, which makes it black outline, white lettering, or you can give it shadows to make it stand out. I don't recommend either of these. Font is where we're going to change the font. And so we'll come back to that in just a second. Numbers, don't change any of this. Just use the source format. There's no reason to change what kind of information are in these cells, right? Because they're not numbers. So we don't want to change anything because they're not numbers. So let's go back to font. So we're going to change it to Arial. Like I said, oops, I hit OK. So it changed everything to Arial. Let's go back. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit OK. Let's go back to font here. But of course, we don't want it to be 10 point. We want it to be 14 point so people can read what it is that we're looking at, right? So this is the x-axis itself, not the label. We can change the size of the label as well. So it's only going to change yes PhD and no PhD. And Arial is a good sans serif font that is readable from a distance, which is good for poster presentations, but it's also useful for people with dyslexia. The letters themselves are created in a way to assist with that. It's not a fully dyslexic font, however, so there can be still some errors in that way. But the kerning as well, the letters are spaced well so that you can spot each individual letter from distances. We're going to leave the typeface as regular because we don't need to make it bold or italic. And then we're going to change this to 14-point font so it is readable from a distance. And then we're going to hit OK, and it's going to make this 14-point font. And of course, pursuing PhD as our axis label is a bit rough, right? It's small. It's probably 10 itself. So let's quickly go to axis title and hit format. Brought up a text box around it, and we are going to type in Arial here, okay? And oh, it was 9-point. We don't want that to be smaller, of course. And so we're just going to change that up to 14-point font. Borders, you can have borders around it. It'll put a border around it where this text box is. The area, you can make it an image if you really wanted to. Transparency, we'll make this, transparent. Font is what we were at. Font effects, what we just looked at. Same kind of font effects that can be there. And alignment, again, you can put it on an orientation and vertically stack it. We don't want to do any of that. We're just going to make it bigger. There you go. Wonderful. Let's move on to the y-axis. Let's do the title first to change the font and the font size. That's the only thing we need to do in this menu. We're going to type in Arial, and we are going to type in or click 14. I think you can change it here, like you can do 12, and it'll make it automatic 13, 14, etc. Okay, and then we're going to hit OK to make that big, right? And so you can see that because it got bigger, it had to put it on 2 lines, and that smooshed everything. Again, you can make this graph as big or as small as you want, and these text boxes will match how big you make it, right? And so I can click on this and make it a little bit bigger that way, and a little bit bigger that way, and there you go. Not 2 lines now. Perfect. Next thing I want to do is modify the y-axis. So we've got our 2 red dots here. Let us know that we're working with the y-axis. We click on the format button because we were in font in the last dialog screen. It brought us there. So it always goes back to what you ended with when you hit OK in the format box. So we might as well change Arial here. Okay. And to 14, we'll skip there. There we go. So it'll change that. Numbers, again, we don't need to mess with numbers here. We don't need to mess with font effects. There's nothing about the effects here that we need. We don't need to make the colors outlined or shadowed. Label, the numbers here is what you'll do. So if you want to rotate them and have them be on a wonky angle, I don't recommend that either, right? We've got the line. This is where we need to change it, right? Because this is a gray line, okay? So we don't want that. So we're going to change this to standard black, zeros. Continuous black. There we go. That's all we want. Positioning, cross other axis at yes PhD. So it's the first one, but you can do no PhD as well. It doesn't really matter. Start or end, you can do that. Place labels near axis. That's what it is here. And then what kind of tick marks do you want? I love it because it makes the tick marks automatically at major on the out. You can do inner as well, and this will do a cross axis interval tick mark, right? If you have both, that makes them cross. Or you can do outer only or inner only. I'm just going to do outer for the sake of argument. And then finally, changing the scale. So here's the thing that in my testing, I realized doesn't change. So in Excel, when you add error bars and you have the major interval or the maximum, at some number, and you add error bars that go past that number, Excel will automatically modify the maximum, right? Because it's automatic. Well, I added the error bars for this, and this particular no PhD has an error bar that extends beyond 12. LibreOffice did not make that change. LibreOffice did not go through and modify it to go from 0 to, let's say, 14. If our major interval is 2, right, then it didn't make it 14, which I thought was weird. So you might have to come back and change your maximum. We'll come back to this one after we add the error bars, because I want to show you what I mean, because it's important to have the full graph on the y-axis rather than the error bar being cut off. Sometimes if your scale doesn't allow for any values, like say above, you go from 0 to 100, and we're talking about % accuracy score, then it's okay for that error bar to be cut off if it goes above 100, because there's no possible way that that score could be above 100. But for hours worked per week, obviously we need to include the upper value of the error bar. So we're going to hit OK here. Did I do font 14? Yes, I did. I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to increase the size. Wonderful. One last thing before we do error bars. axes look great. You can see that there's this line going around. LibreOffice by default puts a border around the chart area. We don't want a border around the chart area. That's not something that is APA style. So over here, you've got your chart wall, and you're going to click on that, and you are going to choose none. As you can see, the white it's just white, and you hit OK, and there you go. The border disappeared. Okay, so here we have what we need. Last but not least, let's get some error bars in here. So error bars are, from what and maybe this is something that I'm missing over here because it's not one of these drop-down menus and it's not one of these. You have to right-click on the bars themselves to get a few pieces of information. You can insert data labels if you want. They come to the top. I don't want that, so I'm going to undo that. Unless if I go to, oh, yes, so I am modifying the data series here. Does it give me format selection options? Yeah, see, it doesn't. Here's where you can change like the kinds of color it is, right? So the area, if you want to change it to a different palette color, right? So we've got standard up. We can do HTML and change the colors. We can do LibreOffice colors, right? And we can change all of these colors. Standard is your standard, right? And then you can put any hex code you want. It also has a picker pick. It has a teardropper, and so you can go with the full RGB scale, HSB, or CMYK, right? And do that. So that's really cool. We don't necessarily need to do that. Other options are you align to the y-axis or secondary y-axis. If you have two y variables on here, that's what you would do. Spacing, 100% is fully apart here. And as you reduce this number, they get closer and closer and closer, right? Zero overlap is they would be touching, but not. Show bars side by side. Would get you to where you just need to go, right? If there are any missing values, leave gap, assume 0, include values from hidden cells, and hide legend entry. All of that. I'm going to click cancel because there's nothing that I want to change about these two blue bars, okay? But I am curious here. There is no option up here regarding, you can turn off your axes up here. That's good. You can modify your axes up here. There's no error bars. So what I'm trying to say is you have to control click or option click or right click. I don't know what it is on Windows. I'm sorry. So either right click to get the option menus, right? So we can get a trend, we can data labels, trend line, mean value line. We don't need that because it would just add the line up here. And then here we have insert X error bars and Y error bars. X error bars are not needed for this. There's no possible reason you would need X error bars because there's no values going horizontally. We do need Y error bars. So we're going to click on that and it's going to open up the error bar options. Okay. And as you can see, it is the data series pursuing Ph.D. is what I called this data series, 3.65 and 10.39. Okay. So we have three options here and then we have the line itself. You don't actually have to change anything about the line. That's awesome, right? It is a continuous line and it's black. That's all we need, right? It's the same thickness as the axes. Perfect. The only thing we need to change here are the indicators, the categories of information and where we find that information. So error indications, we are going to do positive and negative, and they always have caps. You cannot change whether or not they have end caps. You're always going to have end caps. Honestly, I recommend end caps anyways. I don't know why people don't put end caps on them. It's an aesthetic choice, of course. I just don't do it, so I don't understand it, right? The next thing we have to do is we are going to do standard errors, right? And so we've got constant values and percentages, which are usual, the usual suspects. Go away, parallel toolbox. They're the usual suspects. They're always there, right? Or we have this drop down for standard error, standard deviation, variance, or error margins. But we don't actually have the raw data in this file. We have just means, and that's it. So we can't use any of these because these assume that you're going to choose a variable and it's raw data, right? From case 1 to case 50, for example. Subject 1 to subject 50, participant 1 to participant 50. And you're going to use that raw data to calculate the standard error, and that's where you're going to get it from. No, we're not going to do that. We already have the standard error from, I don't know, JASP, Jamovi, maybe Excel, maybe this app, we calculated the standard error, and we're just using this particular spreadsheet to make our graph, and that's fine. So we're going to click on cell range, and we just have to put our cell range parameters, which is awesome. And I wish Excel had this checkbox. Same value for both. We only have to do this once, because if I check that box, negative grayed out. We don't need to actually do anything. All we have to do is put in the cell values for the positive, and it will put on negative. Oh my God, it's an amazing addition. Well done, LibreOffice and OpenOffice devs. Well done. So we need to press this button to select the data range, right? So we're going to click this and it's going to bring up our ability to select it. All we have to do is highlight that. You can see it's a faint pinkish color, right? And it'll bring back the dialog box, and there we go. And as you can see, it put the same value in there. Wonderful. And then we hit OK, and boom, there are our error bars. Yes, PhD, totally fine. Looks great. And as you can see, because 12 is our maximum, but 2.44 goes above 12, 2.44 plus 10.39 goes above 12, we need to modify our y-axis, okay? So we can click on y-axis here, and it'll bring it up. Perfect. So it says automatic. Well, that's not great. I don't want that. Even if I uncheck it and recheck it, even if I uncheck it and hit OK, and then come back and bring it back up, and then hit automatic again, it does not incorporate how the graph changes with error bars, which is a little disappointing. It's a little disappointing, but not as bad as not being able to custom specify values. I'm looking at Google Sheets, right? We just uncheck this and we put 14 here and we hit OK and there we go. Smushes everything back down, but here we have the end cap, positive end cap, which goes just above 12 on this. And if I click off of it, look at that. We've got, sorry, made me scroll down. I'm like, oh my God, where did it go? There we have it. There is your APA style single column graph in LibreOffice. Now I mentioned you can do the same exact thing in OpenOffice. So here's OpenOffice. Sorry, moving it from one thing to another. Here I have my data. I'm going to select it and I'm going to go to, I kind of like this interface looks a little bit more updated. It still kind of reminds me of, I want to say circa 2010 menus. So we're going to go up to chart and it's going to bring up the same chart wizard. Okay. Again, go through the 4 elements. I'm just going to hit finish because it has everything we need. When you click on this to move it, it brings up the properties over here, right? So we've got area and we've got the line, all of that. Same thing is you do need to double click on it to be able to start modifying it. This is quite a large graph, so I am going to reduce its size considerably. There we go. All right, and when we're up here, we can format the same kinds of selections that we had, chart, legend, all of that. There is the ability to add, oh, those are all of it, okay. We can scale the text. Ooh, what does that do? I don't know. Automatic layout, chart type, format selection. So we're actually gonna have to go through here, right? So we're gonna have to say that position. Ooh, interesting. Okay, so a few things are different here when we format things like this. So if we go to chart area and we format selection, right? We don't, borders, that's the one we don't want a border around the graph. So by default, it doesn't have a border, which is great. We hit OK there. Oh wait, it actually does. There's the legend button. Okay, I've just skipped by those. Yeah, format wall, that's the wall. We got to get rid of it. We're gonna do, nope, sorry, none. Hit OK, it gets rid of the wall, right? We do need labels for everything. So we go to x-axis and we format selection, continuous, but I want it to be, oh boy, black. Less options to change things. Scale, positioning, label, numbers, font. Oh, it is, they have Arial on by default, but we want 14. We hit OK. Look at that. Amazing. Okay, so y-axis, same thing, format selection. We want it to be Arial, 14. And then over here, we've got scale and maximum. You know, it looks pretty much the same. We want the line, however, to be black. Oops, that's gray. Black. Hit OK. It changed the scale because I made this very, there we go, very big. Titles. I forgot to add the titles, guys. Forgot to add the titles. So we don't need titles, but we do want, I'll add a question mark for that one. Hours worked per week. There we go. Look at that. Wonderful. We do, and when we do add those titles, we do need to, of course, modify by clicking on format and changing the font to Arial, but 14, that's 13, 14, hit OK. Same thing with you, format the selection and go to 14, wonderful. And then let's add our Y error bars. You can see that there's absolutely nothing with Y or X because why would there be, right? And then we're gonna do cell range, same for both values, only use this one. There we go, wonderful, hit OK, they're all good, but we do need to modify this. Again, format selection and scale, uncheck that to be 14, hit OK. And there you go. Let's make this a little bit bigger now. Wonderful. Same exact, maybe small differences between LibreOffice and OpenOffice, but relatively similar processes. Again, go through the chart wizard first, put in your titles. You know, I forgot, of course, obviously. But it's important to go through that and make sure everything is peachy keen, jelly bean. So that is LibreOffice and OpenOffice, single variable, 2-level bar or column chart in APA style. If you have any comments, suggestions, or questions, please leave those in the comment section down below. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.